Welcome to another episode of the Serie Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina Rzouki, and as always, I'm joined by Nicky Bandini. Now, guys, we've been chatting for about an hour before this podcast. I'm already worn out. I feel like I'm ready to go home. I've already said my pieces on everything. You know? This is what happens when you just
Producer Simon was antagonizing you with... No, you were antagonizing the producer Simon, actually. It wasn't that way around at all. You started telling poor producer Simon, who's a Roma fan, that he should support Juventus, and you were, giving him all the reasons.
Because he's a secret Juve fan. And then he's like... It's almost like Roma's just a hobby, but deep down, he agrees with Juve's ideals. And I'm just like, which is it? Because come on. Producer Simon, just admit that you have a soft spot for them.
Do you know, without sort of rehashing that conversation completely, it was kind of interesting because, I think it's really interesting, when you haven't got a childhood reason to support a team. It's I'm an Arsenal fan because my brother was an Arsenal fan, and my brother was an Arsenal fan because no one else in our football cared about football that much. No one else in our family cared about football that much, especially on the English side. But my granddad was an Arsenal fan, so it kind of all went from there, and we lived close enough. But when fans, and especially people who listen to this podcast, probably English language listeners, might not live in Italy, start thinking about why they would support a team. And I think it's really interesting the reasons people start supporting teams. And I've always been a big one for where would you like to go on holiday? If you'd like to go on holiday somewhere, pick that team, then you've got an excuse to go on holiday there. And that's a good way to pick a team. But what you're suggesting, I think, Mina, is there are certain character traits that you feel fit certain teams. And you think, for instance, with Juventus, I think your case was Juventus for people who are business minded and who are have that perspective on life. Yeah. Perhaps cynical in their business mindedness, given ongoing news stories, without getting too far back down that rabbit hole. But
I always think that you should support a club whose ideology mixes with yours. I'm not somebody who really cares to go and I'm not much into the arts, right? So I don't really care if you're going to entertain me on the football pitch. I need you to win, God damn it. That's what I need you to do, So I sort of they fit my philosophy in life in that sense, It's business, it's about IPOs, let's go into the stock market. I love that, but I also I love conservative stuff as well. I am a little bit conservative in nature. But whereas I do feel there are people that go to football for genuine entertainment or what happens on the sidelines or the ultras or the nature of being a fan. And I don't get that. It's almost I just don't understand that part of football, So when people were really upset about the Super League because it wasn't romantic, I was like, oh, really? It makes perfect sense to me. So I was okay, I have to take a step back and try to see the full picture. So, and because I think producer Simon has a little, conservative in him, I think that he's somebody who's sort of really a Juventus fan because he anyway. Anyway, that's how I think. But it would be nice to see why our listeners support the teams that they support. What is it for? Is it a player? Is it?
That's a great question. I'd love to hear that from people who don't have that historic route, the sort of birth reason, I suppose, to support a team, why they've come to certain teams. Following your logic, Mina, I could totally make a case for if you're someone who just wants to be head over heels about the thing and, everything is 100% of the feeling all the time, then that takes me to somewhere like Roma, maybe. Whereas if you want to be someone who, do you know what, you just a wild ride, you like the ups, you like the downs, well, that's Inter, that's Amala, that's Pazza Inter, where it's going to be the highs and it's going to be the lows, and you're never going to understand what's coming next, but you'll get some of those experiences. I think I can go with you on that. There's sort of different sort of, life perspectives that would fit better for different teams.
Yeah, it's also what you're going through in the moment. I know this sounds crazy, but during in the Champions League, I'm firmly an Inter fan. And I have no idea why I become an Inter fan when I watch the Champions League, because what they did against Barcelona, I was going crazy because it was the pride of Italian football. It was almost they represented everything to me, And so I needed them to win because I needed to prove a point about the quality of Italian football. And I just felt Milan wasn't going to do that for me. So I was firmly an Inter fan, And now, because of Osimhen, I've become this person that's really obsessed with Napoli's journey. When, like, for example, Mancini was at Manchester City, I was a Manchester City fan, and then I fell in love with them even more because I'm obsessed with Manuel Pellegrini, the only coach that I would bring to Juve and sack Allegri for, because you know me, I'm never going to sack Allegri. So, producer Simon is shaking his head because he's very, very upset about Allegri's behavior in the Coppa Italia. But this type of stuff. So I do change as well, if that makes sense. But anyway, do tell us, listeners, why or what the reasons are. I mean, it's always also because of a player, right? Like sometimes you'll love like a Del Piero or a Totti, and that could shape you. But I'm interested to know.
And I totally think if it was like me coming to Italian football blind right now with no previous connection to it, Osimhen would be the reason I would support Napoli, 100%, because he's the most watchable player I think in the league right now.
And also, if anyone watched the game with Sassuolo, we'll talk about it later. Okay, we'll talk about it later. But just how he went to that woman, I love this man so much. Okay, you're nodding, Nikki.
I love that bit. I was laughing a little bit at that video. I don't know if our listeners will have seen it, but yeah, there's a video clip of Osimhen when Napoli were doing their warm-ups against Spezia. Like one of his shots, I guess, hit someone behind the goal, and he goes in to make sure she's okay. And I saw it sort of being translated from ragazza into like a young girl. And I don't know, maybe I just didn't see it well enough on the footage. She didn't look that young. She looks like a young woman to me, not a young girl. But I mean, yes, it was a very sweet thing to do, regardless however old she was.
Yeah, she also looked really confused by what was going on, and then you just see Victor Osimhen going, "I'm so sorry," and you must be like, "It's okay, forget Spezia, you are my man, Napoli all the way," But anyway, let's record a podcast. As we know, it's been it's been an exciting weekend, although there are still some matches to be played. I'm particularly interested in how today lines up because there are, basically I do sort of want to see what happens with Monza. And they are indeed playing against Sampdoria. Today we've got Verona against Lazio and Salernitana versus Juventus tomorrow. So we won't be covering those teams for today, but we'll talk about the action. And nothing is more important perhaps than what happened last night in the Milan derby as Inter hosted Milan. And it was just brilliant choreography with Forza Diavolo coming from the Milan supporters and the Nerazzurri having the serpent face as their choreography. It looked like it's going to be one of the best matches of the season. But for me, actually, I didn't ask you that opinion. We've talked for about an hour and I didn't even ask you that, Nikki. For me, I found this to be a disappointing game in general. Perhaps it had to do with the fact that obviously Milan decided to change everything. So that Stefano Pioli has gotten a lot of flack for sort of mirroring the 3-5-2 that is often utilized by Inter. And within it, they sort of lost the brilliance that makes them Milan, which is the attacking football, which is the bravery that they always go for it and try to score. And we saw a Milan side that's laid down its sword and sort of said, come on, attack us. And it was upsetting to watch, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it was a disappointing derby overall. The atmosphere was amazing, as it always is, and you talked about the big choreography, and I thought there was some of the smaller stuff was good as well. It was a sort of great quick jab from the Milan fans with the champions of Italy welcome the champions of Arabia, of course, making diminishing that Supercoppa win right away. But what you sort of can give out as a fan quickly gets sort of overrun if your team's not very good. And Milan just weren't good at all. It definitely, the game definitely goes the way it does because of what Stefano Pioli does, which is, for anyone who didn't see it, of course, Milan, their title win, the whole sort of character of the team over the last year and a half has been 4-2-3-1 and press high up the pitch and in general play possession football. They're a team that generally wants to have the ball more than not. And they just were the opposite of that. They went to 3-5-2 that was really a 5-3-2 because even Teo Hernandez was barely going up the pitch. They sat in a low block. They didn't press at all. And they basically just tried to, I think, and this is a bit where I hesitate to say that that's what cost them the game, because I think there was a reasonable sort of thought in his head to start off with, which is, look, they'd conceded 12 goals in the last 3 games. I think it's something like 19 in 8 games so far this year. Like, they are conceding goals at a ridiculous rate. And Pioli obviously thought, I can't do this in the derby. Like, I have to fix this. We have to defend. And so he brought in more defenders. But they gave up their ability to attack to such an extent that I also just didn't see any way they could not lose this game playing the way they played it. They invited Inter onto them. They made no effort to contest that first half, it felt like. Inter had 75% of the ball practically in the first half. Milan didn't. In the first half, it wasn't just they didn't have a shot on target. They didn't have a shot, full stop. By the end of the game, I think they managed 4 shots, but still none of them on target. They didn't win a single corner in the whole game. And so it wasn't the derby. It wasn't what you wanted to be, where it's blood and thunder and both teams are colliding and going for it and throwing everything at each other. It felt like a game which Inter controlled at the beginning, mostly controlled all the way through to the end, maybe barring a briefest of moments when Rafael Leao came on.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nikki. I think that it's a very difficult one because, like you said, I do understand his reasonings for this. And one of the things is that Pioli has been criticized heavily for not changing anything. For sort of the only change really being is that he benched Leao in the last match. And everyone was like, no, when we wanted changes, that's not what we meant. We need more bodies in midfield. And I've said, for me, for a long time, that I think that the midfield is the issue. Like, they need to stack it. And so that's what he decided to do. It's exactly that. It's a case of, like, we're going to have to fix our problems. And one thing I always think is when you're losing, and you're losing a lot by a wide margin, then you need to get back to basics. Unfortunately for his team, they haven't recovered the basics because what they've done is gone a little bit more defensive. And I like I said, I understand that. But when your team only manages 10 tackles, when Napoli's managing 22 on average, just to give you like an idea, when you still don't know how to defend set pieces, these are the ones that I think that you need to focus on right now, is the mistakes that are being made. But I feel sorry for Pioli because this isn't a Pioli problem. You can't outmaster this on a tactical level. I genuinely don't think that right now he has many options to go to, because Giroud is not the player that he was before the World Cup. Theo Hernandez is not the player he was before the World Cup. Tonali is just, he hasn't had the season that he had last season. Benacer is either suspended or injured recently. And I just, and for me, the biggest loss, obviously, of all is Mike Maignan, because he organized that defense. This was the best defense since last season. And without him, it is a huge problem. When at the time I wanted Donnarumma to stay in, I was like, throw whatever money you have to, because the goalkeeper is so important. They were good enough to find Mike Maignan to make that difference. And he was almost even better than Donnarumma, to be honest with you. And not having him is making such a difference. And people keep saying, yeah, but look at Pioli, he's so wonderful. Even with all the absences, Milan still play. They can for a while, but after a while, you are literally just overachieving. You have to regress to the mean. And the mean is that this is the quality of Milan is not that great. So unless they're in optimum physical condition and mental condition at the very top, it's going to be difficult. And asking them to always overachieve with a terrible transfer market now and then is an issue. And this is where I say, like, there's been a lot of talk about, should they have gone with Investcorp? Was Redbird the right team, the right people to sort of sell the club to? Not that the club has really been sold, because you know what I mean. I still think that same people are sort of still there doing the same things. But this was a bad transfer market. And I'm not saying that Di Ketelaere and Origi and all of these players won't grow into it, but one of the reasons why sustainability worked so well for Milan in the start, and why the kids were performing well, was also because it was during COVID. And there weren't fans over there overlooking every moment of them. So they were able to grow in peace. And that's when they started this journey together and have like the authority of an Ibrahimovic, of a Giroud, of a Simon Kjaer at the back to help that. Now you're asking a lot of these kids like the Ketelaere who've come in from Belgium to perform at this high level straight away because, you're part of a champion team, the one that just won the Scudetto. And I just think it's going to need more time. When you have a sustainable project, unfortunately, you can't guarantee consistency. And this is not on Pioli. This is a team effort. And unfortunately, management have also let the team down.
Yeah, so you know, you mentioned De Ketelaere is obviously the one who gets most attention. There's also Malik Thiaw, there's also Astor Franks. Those guys are all like 20, 21 years old. And like, yeah, maybe they'll come good. And that's sort of the point. But like between them so far this season, I think they've started like 8 games or something. And yeah, Origi's got like another 5. Like they've just not even been considered ready to start games. And so the transfer market clearly was not good enough to keep them competing at the level they'd competed at. And I think everyone knew a bit they were overachieving last season. But having said that, Mina, I still think there's something sort of to dig into on that point of, you know, up till Christmas, they were still second. They'd won 10 games, drawn 3 and lost 2. I think they weren't going to get Napoli the way they were playing, but they were doing well enough. And this sort of dramatic post-World Cup collapse, I think you definitely hit on one part of it in what you just said, because you mentioned Giroud. Giroud is not where he was. And it's really fascinating in this game, I think, the sort of confidence factor that is set like this sort of diverging path, I guess, between him and Lautaro Martinez. Martinez, who we all, you know, prodded fun at and joked at having like a bit of a mess World Cup final, but has obviously come back from the World Cup being like, I'm a World Cup winner, and is just bossing it. He's playing as well as he has for Inter. Like, he's doing really well. But the Giroud thing obviously like hit in this game because there was that moment, wasn't there, in the 75th minute? And it was just about the only time all game when you thought, hang on, Milan could score.
Yeah.
When the hours come on and he plays him through and Giroud miscontrols it. And it's fascinating because it's like freaky coincidences, but this game is almost exactly, it's like 1 or 2 days out from a year after last season's derby. And it's about 1 minute off exactly the same moment in last season's derby when Milan, who were 1-0 down in that game and who'd taken 1 point from their previous 2 games, have Giroud save their season, right? Like, he scores twice in 3 minutes and the whole story changes from there. And this time he miscontrols it. And I think it sort of speaks to lots of things in that moment. Like, there's a bit of like, well, you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice, right? Like, what happened last season was really special. But also just the whole team right now feels like it's in that sort of existential funk. But the thing I wanted to ask you, Mina, because like, to me, this is kind of the biggest sort of almost like addressable issue out of all of it. Like, to me, I feel like the answer to your problems, at least right now, cannot be dropping your best player. Rafael Leao is your best player. And like, okay, if you want to give him a kick up the bum, you dropped him against Sassuolo, it didn't work, but at least you've done it. And now you can say, okay, you've had your kick up the bum now. I understand there's this whole contract situation going on. He obviously hasn't signed his renewal. He's out of contract next year. There's a lot of talk about release clauses. Basically, his agent wants a release clause about 70 million euros, whereas Milan want that like 150 million euros. And I understand their position on that because 70 million is not a lot for a player of his quality. And I wonder how much that's playing into this. But Pioli's whole discourse afterwards, where he's like, oh, you know, I can't play two players up front and have one of them be Leao. He doesn't play that position right. I just can't buy that. Like, they had no threat on the counter-attack sitting deep like that because they didn't have Leao on the pitch.
Yeah, it seemed like a really odd decision. That's the one thing that I have to say with Pioli that you have to think about. Like, I don't understand that at all. One of my main issues with Pioli at the time was that you couldn't support 4 forwards with only 2 midfielders, right? And that put a lot of pressure on the defense. And here, weirdly enough, Arrigo Sacchi talks about this as well and said, you know, put another midfielder in. It's not about stripping away like the whole balance of the side, you know? And I do sort of understand that. But I think that if you're ever going for a win, and if you are trying to play sort of the Roma Juventus way, which is that, you know, let's get back to basics and just defend and see what we can do on the counter-attack, then do so with your best player on the pitch. And that is, for me, is the one thing that I have to say I cannot at all comprehend. I don't know whether he just feels that right now, he does mention about in the post-match conference about him not being in the game for the full 90 minutes. And, you know, he does have a habit of drifting in and out. And I wonder if there's some sort of punishment there. Whereas Origi, you know, scored, and maybe now we can sort of reclaim this player and make him something. But how many touches of the ball did Origi have? Like 14? So
yeah,
it surprises me. Yeah.
Well, you were just thinking in and out of the game for Leao. Like, Origi was just out of the game, full stop. Like, didn't do anything.
Precisely. And it's interesting that in the second half when Leao does come, that he does trigger Giroud, but Giroud obviously is not Giroud of old at the moment in time and suffering in that. But like I said, I do think that this is a team that has overachieved for a long time. Of course, there are things that you could do better. You could have played Leao. At the end of the day, Giroud could have scored that goal and it would have been 1-1. So I don't know how to... I don't know how much I blame Pioli. I think this is the whole sort of thing just a little bit falling apart right now. And I think that everyone has and should be blamed for it, the players, the coach, as well as management. But I also do think that there will come a point where you can't expect them to just be going at this level the whole way through. There was always going to be a point where it falls apart, especially when they've had so many absences and they're sort of using a lot of makeshift balances all over the pitch. And I think that's the issue. But transfer market needs a lot of work for me. There is something on a psychological level which makes me feel like they've lost that confidence that they've played with. And I don't know how to reclaim that until you get back to basics. And even if they get back to basics, I don't think their team is built in a way that, say, Roma and Juve are, which can absorb a little bit of pressure and then go forward. Their team can't absorb pressure. They just don't have those types of players. Their players are attack players, almost all of them. But I don't think they are ones that can just focus solely on defense and play that kind of way. So that's what worries me. Whereas, let's say, Inter obviously can do that if they want to. But theirs is just, Milan is just so quirky in the way that it's been built, so beautiful in its desire to be technical, to be always going forward and looking forward, that I'm not entirely sure that if you try to get them back into the basics, they would succeed. So what they really needed is a good bench that would allow people to rest and then keep moving it. And unfortunately, they don't have that. So I don't even know how to get them out of the situation if I was in charge. So I don't know what we should be expecting, because I'm really scared when they face Spurs.
Yeah, Spurs is one thing. I no longer can see them getting through that tie, and that's more about them than it is about Tottenham. Although Tottenham obviously played well at the weekend. I don't know, Mina. Do you think this team's definitely still going to get in the top four? Because I'm not convinced anymore.
It depends, because if Mike comes back, when tomorrow comes back, I don't know if Zlatan's ever coming back or he's just a mascot now. I'm not really entirely sure of all of this, but I do feel there is a way back. I just don't know how it can be established, because I honestly wouldn't even know where to start, because I did think that you need to get back to basics. And I did think that they learned a few things in this match that were important for them to learn. I thought there are certain points that they were very good defensively, At the end of the day, Inter just scored one goal. And I don't know whether that says more about Inter than it does about Milan. But that's another issue I have with Inter. It's kind of like all on Lautaro Martinez, who is a streaky player. And when he's good, and you could say the confidence of Argentina, it is fantastic. He is like one of the best number 9s to watch. And Çalhanoğlu always plays like a superhero because of the pettiness of Milan, that he's always trying to be like, yeah, screw you, I made the right decision, and his pettiness, and it all just gets really fun for all of us. But he plays amazingly. Frankly speaking, he was stunning to watch. Inter were very good. And yet, despite, like you said, 75% possession, like a number of shots, and then you end up with a 1-0 victory over this Milan. Actually, if I'm Inter, I'm annoyed. I'm super annoyed at this. This is the stuff that knocked you out of the Champions League last season. You were the team that had the most shots on goal and didn't manage to turn that into goals. And yet again, we've gone back to, hopefully Lautaro Martinez scores. If he's having an off night, where am I going? Maybe Dzeko will come in with something, and then Barella makes these mistakes, and it upsets me in the second half. I'm telling you, Milan could have gotten something.
It's so soon now, the Champions League. It's crept up, hey? It's February now. We're 8 days as we're recording this away from the Milan game, I think. So, yeah, it's here again.
And it's going to be, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be scary. But what did you think about Inter before we move on? Because I feel like we've just focused so much on that we haven't given them enough props, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I had the same thing with my column I wrote on this game, and I did focus much more on Milan. I think that's appropriate, because I just didn't feel like this game was as much about Inter. I know it was a good big moment for Inzaghi, because even though he always seems to win the cup games against Milan. Wasn't this his first league win in the Milan derby? And it's a big win for them, keeps them sort of positioned as the
Second.
top of the league minus Napoli, basically, which is almost feels like it's a different league at this point, doesn't it? There's Napoli and then there's the rest of the league. So it's a good win for Inter. I think they were far and away the better team in this game, which is the main thing, to say. They won, they were the better team. You're right. They weren't as ruthless as they could have been, and it would have been much better to have put this game away. But honestly, I didn't come away thinking, wow, Inter played that great. I thought in the first half, honestly, given how sort of submissive Milan were being, Inter were quite predictable. They didn't do anything particularly clever. They just sort of kept trying to get wide and put balls in. And I think they actually thought they were going to get more. It almost felt like they thought they were going to get more mistakes out of Tatarusanu than they did. I thought Tatarusanu had an okay game.
He did, yeah.
But in the end, they did find that one ball, didn't they, to near post, and it worked for them. And they did. Look, they did score 2 more disallowed goals at the end, and the offside one against Lautaro, it was correct, but it was marginal, right? So another day he starts a fraction later and it's 2-0. Like it's not like they didn't have other chances. I don't know. I just sort of feel like Inter trundling along. I think there's no part of me anymore that thinks they're going to be good enough to catch Napoli. But I also think out of all the teams that are not Napoli, they're the one I'm most confident will finish in the top 4. So I guess that's realistically what they're aiming for now in the league.
I agree. Guys, this is a good time to tell you that this is a free episode for everyone to hear in full on the main podcast feed. If you like what you're hearing, we do have a 14-day free trial for our Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership. So if you want to join and you're not sure you want to join, then do go on a free trial and see what you like. That will give you access to full catalog. And to hear and read more about that, head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now. And hopefully subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi membership for free at the moment. Right. Let's move on to Spezia Napoli, because this is just it's sort of like our weekly 5-minute, oh my God, is Victor Osimhen just the greatest guy in the world to watch segment. Is Kvaratskhelia just, what I think is so astonishing is today I was reading this thing about Kvaratskhelia. I don't know where I was reading it. One of the Neapolitan websites, and they were saying about how young he is, and I was like, yeah, but he's like, I don't know why in my head I don't know, I never read people's ages, and I'm always shocked by it. He's 21.
They're all too young now. Yeah. I think the problem is they're all too young now. Like, we look at all of them and just like, it's children. They're all children.
Yeah. I mean, in real life, I think someone who's 30 is a child, so you could just imagine what I think of a 21-year-old. Yeah.
Basically, other than Zlatan, they're all children.
Yes, Zlatan is he's like one of us, right? But I'm like still in a world where I want it to be Giroud's and Zlatan's and Ronaldo's, where it's our ages. And then he's 21. Like, how do you do what you're doing at 21? Like, it's unbelievable. It never even in my mind, about everything that I've read, I can tell you where he lives in Napoli. I can tell you how he gets to work, and I couldn't tell you his age because I'd never even thought to think or ask myself about it. So he's super shocked.
He looks older. Like, he doesn't look old, but he looks old from 21. Like, and I wonder, like, he's obviously had a life, hasn't he? And
I always had work done.
Had some age to it. No, the opposite. No one ages themselves up, do they? Maybe some people do.
I swear to you, I think my niece is doing it, but
maybe when they're like under 18, some people try to like look older to get drinks or whatever. But like no one like goes for surgery to look older when they're 21, do they? Is that a thing?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
The world,
if you really look
changing
at his
so
face,
fast, I don't know.
If you look at his face, though, if you really, really focus, he does look young. I'm always shocked by Barella being 24, and now she's 25. He's starting to age, actually, but you know what I mean. Like, I still to think that this guy is 4 years younger. For me, it's mind blowing. I don't know why. Even though I see Haaland, and obviously we know how young these kids are. And Pedri looks like he's a kid, so I understand that, but 21 and you're doing it.
I think there's a few things, isn't it? Like, it's like I say, like, he looks a bit older, like he can do the proper facial hair, which not everyone, not all men's football players can do that at 21, but he can. And he also plays like someone who's older, I think. Like, he's not...
Yes.
I feel like it sort of feels normal not to do it as well as Haaland does it, but to be like a sort of cocky centre forward who's like a bit bullish and gets in people's faces and scores goals. That feels like 21-year-old behaviour. But to be this sort of crafty, like thoughtful player who weaves weaves patterns and unpicks things, that feels like it's a level of sort of maturity that's a bit different as a footballer as well.
Yes, like if you tell me Victor Osimhen and Haaland are young, it's exactly that. It's the way they play their game. I think of them as being young. They're bullish in their nature. But it's precisely the cunning nature of Kvaratskhelia that made me like shocked. Even though Pedri plays a very mature way of like weaving, like you said, it's still.
But he's he's an old head as well. He feels much older in the way he plays. Yeah.
But maybe because he actually looks like a kid, I'm not that shocked. Him and Gavi, I feel like most of the time I'd want to hold their hands if I'm crossing the road, but you know what I mean. Can I just tell you as a side note, my boyfriend insists on doing that when we cross the road because he thinks I don't know how to cross the road. So he always makes hold my hand, and I'm like, stop saying that really loudly.
Do you know what came into my head when you said that, Mina, as well, was... with your saying, like, with Pedri, it's like you need to hold his hand to help him cross the road. Whereas with Kvaratskhelia, you might think, oh, he's helping me to make sure because, I'm old now, I need help getting across the road.
That's where you thought I was going with this?
Well, because, he's because he seems more, like, responsible and older.
Nicky, I don't know whether to cry or laugh.
What about me, not you? No, I wasn't saying you were saying. I was saying that's what my brain went. Well, that's true. But I'm allowed to be the same age and feel ancient myself without thinking you are. That's not how that works.
I know that feeling. But yes, I mean, people do it to me. Like, I still feel like I get treated like a kid most of the time by everyone around me. But I quite like that, to be honest with you. There's a part of me that enjoys it. Just not when it's said out loud.
It's really interesting. We're going so far off topic. Pure producer Simon. Who cares? It's our show. But like, it's sorry, Simon. I really feel that in my bones though. Like, I like, because I have, I've broken Mina. Mina's gone.
It's our show. Oh no, please don't edit that out. That was...
I didn't mean that in a mean way. I really didn't.
No, I know. It's just that you're so sweet. That's why it was funny.
It's our show. But it's true though, because like I have friends now in their 20s and I have friends who are in their like 60s and 70s. And what's nice is about being in the middle is that actually you get to feel old sometimes and young sometimes. And both of it's quite nice to feel sometimes. That was where I was actually going with that thought.
That was the tangent.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, Nicky, this was just spectacular. Right, I have no idea what we're talking about. All of this was to say that Kvaratskhelia is amazing.
Yes, he is very good.
Okay, let's give you...
Just to get back onto the football quickly, actually Spezia played a really good first half in this game, and like it looked like this could actually be like a difficult game for Napoli. And then the second half started and they just gave away a completely needless penalty, and then that, completely changed everything. But yeah, Spezia for 45 minutes actually did give Napoli quite a good game.
That's what I agree with you. And this is the Spezia side that had 9 players missing because of suspensions and injuries. I mean, that was like really hard for Gotti to bring his team along and sort of figure out a way of neutralizing what is like the best duo in Italian football and potentially like right now one of the top 3 in Europe as well. And just to give you some stats, Osimhen has gotten, he's gotten 16 goals and 3 assists. Kvaratskhelia 8 goals and 9 assists. I mean, that's just crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Meanwhile, I do agree with you. It's the handball, and it becomes a penalty that Kvaratskhelia scores. And it's sort of all over because then they have to try to find an equalizer, and in doing so leave gaps in the back that then obviously get punished by the likes of Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia.
There are mistakes leading up to the goals as well, but like the other ones. But yeah, the first one feels like the big one because it just breaks the floodgates, doesn't it? It changes the game.
But this is it. It is the individual errors. It is Mattia Caldara for the third goal that you're just thinking, oh no, that's just like, oh, that's terrible. And I do think the goalkeeper could have done better on the second. But it's exactly that. And unfortunately for Spezia is that that's what they have in them, is that they have lots of, these types of individual mistakes in general. But as a team effort, I mean, I was really impressed with what Gotti managed to create. But for them, this is their fourth loss in a row in all competitions. What I find so brilliant about Napoli is that they work hard. They always work hard, even though they have these brilliant two. It is reading things like 22 tackles, how many times they rob possession. They are a side that cover kilometers. They work hard. But also another thing that I found interesting is Osimhen gets 130,000 euros for scoring 20 goals. And then that amount is there for every 5 more he gets. Like, I wonder if by the end of it, he's going to be like on 15 million. The season is good.
It's definitely
yes.
Adding up.
Yes, but
16 so far.
They are going to be interesting to watch in the Champions League. And I wonder whether or not their focus on that will change anything or not. But they're so far ahead now, 13 points ahead of Inter. You would think that that's it. The Scudetto is theirs, but we don't want to get carried away yet because I'm also scared of jinxing them. The other game that I thought was really interesting, actually, was Roma Empoli. Well, only interesting for the first 6 minutes because that was it. That was all Roma needed to win the match against Empoli. In the sense that, yet again, it was 2 set pieces, identical in its nature. Dybala with a corner, bam, goal, and it was over. And I felt really sorry for Empoli, who you feel like had really put so much thought into how they were going to try to stop Roma, but obviously couldn't defend a set piece to save their life.
And this has been one of Mourinho's great successes there, right? Like the attacking set pieces have been a real weapon for Roma, and obviously it helps when you've got Dybala there to put those crosses in. He makes such a difference to the team in general, but certainly he has something from set pieces as part of that. And they'll punish you from that. And it's not the most, it's not Napoli, it's not Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen making you jump out of your seat as much, but it's effective and it wins games. And actually, they could have won this by more as well. There was a ridiculous triple save by Vicario later in this game that, it's one of those things where I'm watching and going, well, that's going in my end of season awards piece, The Guardian. Like, that was ridiculous. That was incredible. So it could have been more. It wasn't that they just completely stopped after that, but the game was very much sort of fell over very quickly because of those 2 goals. And I'm sort of curious, Mina, I was saying this to you just before we started, and I don't know if you have a perspective on it. But I was curious because, of course, Roma, they went out of the Coppa Italia to Cremonese on Wednesday or Thursday. I think it was Thursday. Wednesday. And they, missed a real chance to win some silverware there, right? Because they would have been through to the semi-final. The semi-final would have been against Fiorentina. Not Fiorentina pushovers, but certainly you can see worse opponents in a semi-final. You are ahead of them in the league, the team you think you can beat. And then you've got a final and you've got a chance to win some silverware, build on the trophy that you won last season with the Europa Conference League. They've missed that now. So now it definitely feels like the main focus for what's left of the season. You think, well, getting into the Champions League would be big for Roma, right? They haven't been there for a while. They want to get in. And I imagine that there was a point earlier this season when it looked like, or I certainly would have assumed that it looked like from where I was sitting, the most likely way they were going to get into the Champions League was by winning the Europa League, which they are still in. But now the top 4 has opened up so much. I do wonder if the top 4 is priority number 1 right now, because it looks really possible. If Juventus' points penalty isn't overturned, then I think I only really see Inter clearly ahead of them. They're in that group after that with Lazio, with Atalanta. And I think I would, obviously, and Napoli, who are going to win the league. But I think I see them as maybe even the front runner in that group. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you think about that. Well, with Milan as well.
Let's see. If Lazio win today, they'll be 1 point ahead of Roma. Napoli, we're saying will win it. Inter, we're saying probably likely to come second, right? Let's just imagine Juventus stay in their position. Then that leaves two more places. And you're saying Milan's out?
I'm not saying they're out, but I'm saying I don't think that Milan's current problems are going to sort of snap your fingers and disappear. So I'm now really starting to think that out of that next group of 4 teams, which is Roma, Lazio, Atalanta and Milan, if I had to pick one that I felt like I had to sort of, I don't know, stake my house on, I wouldn't want to do it with any of them. I don't trust any of them that much. But if I had to, it might be Roma. I don't know. Like I'm really sort of struggling with that thought now. But like I don't feel that confident in any of them. And I think Roma, the underlying stuff, like the underlying numbers and like expected goals all season have been pretty good. And if Dybala stays healthy, then I don't see why they shouldn't.
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, we haven't been friends to Jose Mourinho on this podcast. We've always expected a little bit more. And he spoke a lot in his post-match conference about limitations. Like, this is what we can do. We can't really do much more. Obviously, there are financial rules that we have to respect. And some players that will come will not be people that will change everything around. They've had to live with a few injuries that have obviously hampered their season. But I think that the setup that's working now, I have to give them credit for it, because I do think that they are a side that sort of earned their right to attack, and their foundations are very strong. And you have to credit Mourinho for that, in the sense that defensively, they're a team that obviously doesn't offer you very much. They're stingy. But I love that the midfield duo of Matic and Cristante right now, it just works so well. Just even in this match, they just always know exactly how to stop everything and neutralize things from the opponent. At the same time, trigger counterattacks, really offer themselves up to the forward line if need so. But it's about that brilliant shield in the middle that works to secure the defense. And I'm somebody, you know me, like I love a good defense, right? And I think that midfield works so well with the overall aspect of Roma and the way that Jose Mourinho wants to. Like, let's close the back door and then we can work on going forward. And when you have people like Dybala, who can obviously always make the difference at certain moments because of their technical quality, and if we do see Tammy Abraham try to reproduce at least what he did in the second half of last season, then you always have you have it in you to win, even if it's a 1-0 or a 2-0 on this occasion against Empoli. And I think that that's what I mean about going back to basics. You know, if you know how to get something on a set piece, if you know how to counterattack, if you can close up your back door, you always give yourself a chance to win. And that's what I have to admire. It's why I admire Allegri, and that's why I admire what now Mourinho is managing to achieve. It becomes difficult at times when he hasn't achieved that balance, which you did see in the start of the season. But I think that right now I have to agree with you, because I think Roma's overall simplicity is actually kind of nice to watch, in the sense that everyone knows exactly what they're doing, especially with Zalewski and Shaarawy on the wide areas. I really like watching it. I just sort of hoped that their forward line would be a little bit more interesting, because I'm not that keen on the Abraham obviously season. I do think that he's getting better and better, but it's also like, if he's not there, if Dybala's not there, then there's very little. And that's the problem that we get to. But Pellegrini works so hard, and maybe you're right, maybe it is that. But there's also Atalanta, who unfortunately had a terrible game against Sassuolo. And to me, they're just right now, they're one of the best teams to watch in football. Unless, of course, they get a red card, even though it's unconventional. So I don't know if anyone watched this, but Atalanta lost 1-0 to Sassuolo. And this was a really interesting game because, to be honest with you, they were struggling in the first 30 minutes anyway. Sassuolo already had 5 shots on goal before Milan even got the red card and was sent off. So Atalanta weren't having a great time of it in the beginning. They obviously lost midweek in the Coppa Italia themselves. So they were just a shadow of themselves against Inter, frankly speaking. And then lost a player to red card, felt like they couldn't really come back. And then in the second half, we saw sort of the real Atalanta. And it wasn't enough, unfortunately, for them, because I think Sassuolo had a terrific game. They're really starting to build up some steam again. Terrific might be a stretch too far, but you know what I mean. And they had to hold on, really, to secure this win. But Luis Muriel then gets a red card, and Atalanta were down to 9 at the very end. Interesting game. But there, to me, I can't figure it out between them and Roma who I would go for, because Atalanta have this ability to do it all that I'm not entirely sure Roma have.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, maybe I'm being too reactive to them losing a game. Obviously, like we've talked about Ademola Lookman, the season he's having, they have got a lot going for them, Atalanta. And as you say, this was a very particular game at the weekend. Losing a player after 30 minutes makes a big difference. I do think Sassuolo as well, maybe just sort of, they've caught them on the rise, haven't they? They've come off that, I guess, morale-boosting win over Milan. It was a really nice goal from Loriente that breaks the deadlock in this one. So sometimes individual matches happen. So it's going to be a really interesting race over the next few weeks anyway. The title race doesn't look like it's going to be that interesting. It'll be exciting to see Napoli win, but doesn't look like it's going to get close. But the top four race is very much wide open. There's still just, 5 points between Inter in second and Milan in sixth. So yeah, lots of competition there for those remaining Champions League spots.
Actually, there is one thing that I didn't ask you when it comes to Roma. Obviously, you've heard the news about Zaniolo potentially going to Galatasaray. Mm-hmm. We've spoken about him at great length, obviously, on this show about his position, about the fact that we feel sorry for him, but can also understand that the club are very upset. And I do really feel for the player. But if he does go to Galatasaray and they're saying that it's 18 million, does that satisfy anyone? I feel like it's lose-lose.
It satisfies my desire for a story, because I think that, suddenly you look at Galatasaray and you think it's almost like the sort of home for waifs and strays, isn't it? With Dries Mertens there and Mauro Icardi there and Zaniolo. I mean, Zaniolo and Icardi just feels like a sitcom waiting to be written. I don't know. A buddy movie that we didn't know that we needed. But yeah, I mean, I who knows? Some people have gone to Galatasaray and other teams in Turkey as well and used them as like a really powerful sort of springboard to where they're trying to get to in European football. That is a team that gets to compete in the top European competitions every season, that has a very sort of powerful and passionate position within its domestic football. Maybe it would be good for him to have a change of scene and do something completely different. But I don't know what Roma was sort of hoping for financially. It feels like less than they would have wanted, but at the same time, sometimes it's better to cut your losses with someone who's causing disruption and move on. It'll be interesting. To see if more comes of that in the coming days.
But doesn't it serve both of them? I mean, he's come out and apologized, right? I mean, it's perhaps not enough. At the same time, he's also wanted time off because of everything that he's going through now on a mental level, which you can understand. But it sort of serves both their interest for him to do really well in the second half of the season to help Roma, but also to sort of make sure his price tag is worthy of Roma, who had obviously thought that they had a great asset that they can sell. And if they're selling for 18 million because they don't want a loan with an obligation, they want to sell outright, it's just not enough for one of the brightest talents that we thought was going to be Zaniolo, And maybe he's never going to be that guy. Maybe he's going to be, a Cassano or a Balotelli, whatever you want to say, But I have faith. I still have faith in this kid. For as long as he's still a kid and I can still legitimately call him that, then I want to say that. And I think that if he accepts his position and sort of promises to work hard on and give everything, it serves both of them for them to just sort of forgive and forget and get back on track and get the money that Roma deserve if they want to sell him, and for him to move to a place that he feels that is part of his big plan. Otherwise, the only team that I think misses out on all of this is the Italian national team, and I just can't have that.
Yeah, I share that with you in terms of who's sort of interested. If there's anyone who's interested, I am invested in his Italian national team. So yeah, it would be nice for him to be reclaimed as a talent.
Yeah, it is really sad. Did you watch the Coppa Italia? Because there were some very boring and some interesting moments, would you say?
Yeah, I didn't get to see all 90 minutes of all four games, but I certainly watched plenty of it, and there were some turn-ups. We mentioned Roma before. Roma exiting that competition to Cremonese. Cremonese, this sort of bizarre story that they've managed to now play 21 games in Serie A and not win any of them, and yet at the same time they lost to Lecce this weekend, didn't they? 2-0. At the same time, they have knocked both Napoli and Roma out of the Coppa Italia and are in the semi-finals. So yeah, very odd that you can't win any league games at all, but you managed to knock out 2 of the top teams in the league that you play in. And
I did have high hopes for them against Lecce.
Yeah, it's certainly a come down to earth moment, isn't it? I know some people were sort of painting the cup game against Roma as this like revenge moment for Cyril Dessers, who of course played against them in the Conference League final and lost. And then what else happened in the Coppa Italia? Where our pre-podcast conversation all got so heated, Mina, Max Allegri getting angry and producer Simon not happy about it.
Well, yeah, that was what it was. He was very angry with Dybala. So some interesting, not very many interesting points to honestly highlight. So obviously we saw Lazio take on Juventus. Di Maria managed to somehow provoke Allegri into madness. And our dear conservative producer doesn't like this type of behavior on sidelines. So,
Poor Simon.
Poor Simon. And so he said that, we need to look at that deeply. But what it was only interesting for is, honestly, I can tell you that Chiesa and Vlahovic were back on the pitch and everyone wanted to see them perform brilliantly as this duo that everyone had talked about as, virtual Juve. One day we're going to see, Chiesa, Vlahovic and Di Maria all perform beautifully to, I don't know win what competition anymore, but either way, just to be on the pitch to do something interesting. And they managed to get a 1-0. It wasn't through them, but they did get a 1-0 and they defeated Lazio. So they will be facing Inter. Inter are the team that defeated Atalanta. And they have the king of the cups as their coach. So I'm just never going to go against Simone Inzaghi when it comes to these competitions. I think he'll win this all the way. On the other side of it as well, we had obviously Roma being knocked out to Cremonese. And Cremonese will now play Fiorentina, who won their match. Is that right?
Which I think is, no, so it was a really fun game actually an interesting game, anyway, fun's not right, but an interesting game between Fiorentina and Torino, and it's obviously I think the semi-final that almost feels like, well, they both get semi-finals in completely different ways, aren't they, actually, when really you've got sort of the Derby d'Italia on one side of the draw, which is always a big game and a great game and an enjoyable game. And I think probably with Juventus' points penalty feels like it's going to be a bigger moment for Juventus than it otherwise would have been, because, even if you can't have the league season you wanted to do, then maybe the cup is the one thing Juventus can aim for. But equally, Inter are out of the title race, so it's their chance to win some silverware. And then on the other side of the draw, you have Fiorentina and Cremonese, for whom this is a real chance to win silverware. So actually, I think this is actually about as compelling a set of semi-finals as I could ask for in the cup. And who knows, if Fiorentina win and Juventus win, then you get another rivalry game in the final, because Fiorentina hate Juventus, or at least their fans do. So the Dusan Vlahovic derby, I guess we could call it.
And
although the hatred goes back much beyond that. Yeah.
Maybe we can ask to borrow Benedeschi and have those trio up front against Fiorentina, and then just make it a real grudge match, But obviously, as we've mentioned, there are 3 more matches to be played for this week 21 of Serie A. There's pretty much nothing else to really discuss going forward. I think we've mentioned all the big games. Should we do some shout outs?
Yeah.
We've got some new listeners, some new Tifosi members. So thank you so much for joining and listening in. Hello and welcome to the new members. We're starting off with Andrew Fanisteel. I think that's how you pronounce your name, Andrew. If it's not, do let me know. Jack Overstreet, welcome. And Kieran Power.
And also, thank you so much, Henry Bell, the co-editor of the website gentlemanentrue.com. and host of the Shadow of Vesuvio podcast. Thanks also to Nate Pedrotti and Mike Hendricks. Thanks all of you for supporting the show and for being our Chronicles Tifosi. We'll be back on next week. We actually I think we decided we're going to record on Monday. I'm going to be away covering the Super Bowl for The Guardian next week, so our timings are going to be a bit different, but hopefully actually it might not affect the timing of the podcast, because we normally have the podcast upload on Tuesdays anyway. So just bear with us if the main podcast is a little bit of a different time to normal. And maybe we'll get some voice notes to you in the meantime as well. But in any case, thank you for listening and for being with us all the way through to the end. And we'll see you very soon. Bye.
Serie Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.